everybody, and welcome to the media show on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'm going to be your moderator for today, and I'm going to try to moderate this august group that we have today. First of all, we're going to bring in the gentleman that has over 100 years experience in the media. He's actually a journalism major from Marquette University. We'll bring in somebody you can't miss. One person even said, I can't get rid of him everywhere I go. This guy shows up. And everyone who knows who he is, it's Mark Lee. Mark, welcome to the radio show, and you are everywhere.
Yeah, the media show. Glad to be here. Actually, folks used to say that even in person because they would run into me at events and things like that. And then the pandemic came, and I got into this live streaming space and all in that kind of way. Even though I am getting out and about again because I went to a couple of events. I was out and about on this particular weekend, so it's good that we are able to mingle with our friends and all in that space. I got a quick question for you, and I'm hoping that you'll bring on Rick and Jim as well, and I know Sasha also. But my quick question before we bring the rest of the folks on is, I had the pleasure yesterday of watching a show that apparently was on one network, then it got pulled from that network, now it's on another network, and there's all these popular reality shows. So we all know about The Bachelorette, The Bachelor, and a number of others. But this particular show, I cannot be on because you have to get married before you can have this other aspect going on. Because it's called The Big D. And I was thinking, oh, it's a show about Dallas. But apparently they put all these divorced couples in Costa Rica, of all places, and they are supposed to match up with somebody other than their spouse. So their ex-spouses are there with them. They can't match up with their ex-spouses initially. They're supposed to go on dates with other people. And who knows, they may eventually wind up with their ex-spouses because somebody will win the prize and will be the monetary winner and get some other prizes as well. And who knows, they may wind up with their ex-spouse as their successful new date, but then this is the whole concept. And I think they even brought in some singles to mix it up and everything. But I was going and I'm like, so we're taking The Bachelorette and going the opposite direction. So these are all folks that had relationships, some that were long standing, like at least a decade or two, some that were like only a year or two. And it was called The Big D. And at first I was going like, Big D, that's Dallas. But then I realized the Big D they were referring to was divorce and all the So that was the Big D. So I'm wondering if and we'll bring in Jim Eade from the Chess Foundation and everything. I know that he's happily married and he would never be part of the Big D.
He can't afford it. He can't afford it. If Jim got divorced, he loses all possible monetary support whatsoever in his life. Because he's one of these.
I would still be on modern investing, but for a different reason.
For different reasons, yeah. He's looking to invest.
I looked at, I grew up in the 70s. I looked at all the divorces among my parents and step parents and decided it wasn't worth it. My wife and I have been, because I have excellent insurance thanks to the Writers Guild, we've been able to do couples counseling for 30 years.
That's good.
Yeah, we're sticking with each other.
You may be blessed with counseling for the next 30 years. That's all I can say.
That's actually what they had a relationship consultant as part of the show. Apparently some winners from the Bachelorette kind of narrative were the hosts of this particular show. And like I said, it was about maybe 6 or 7 couples that were all involved and all in that space. But that is one of the things when the one couple gentlemen, because the women got to kick out one guy, and next week the guys will kick out one woman and everything. But they kicked him out of the area, and then his ex got to go say her goodbyes. And one of the things that she said was that that they needed to do couple counseling, and she wished that they had done that earlier. And I think he was still very heartbroken because he wanted to get back together with this particular young lady. And they were all different ethnicities, different age ranges, different other things. So they did try to balance it out. But I just found it fascinating for a couple of reasons. One network loved it and had it on for a matter of a minute or two, and then it didn't last that long with them. So then the other network is like, hey, we'll take it and we'll grab it. And now it's on that particular network.
You're going to see a lot, I think, in the next couple of months, you're going to see a lot more of this because the writers' strike is 7 weeks in and probably has at least another 7 weeks and maybe a lot longer. And they're going to need to roll out more reality to fill the gap left by scripted shows.
Can't we do gladiators and lions? Because it seems like we're getting back into that space where it's as cool as possible.
But see, it doesn't affect us because we have talk shows, so it doesn't really matter. So we don't really care. improvised talk shows, who could care less?
The trouble with people on dating shows staying together is they're all hot people with high self-esteem. You got to be like my wife and me. We're two people with kind of low self-esteem who like worry that if they ever broke up, they'd never be able to get together with anybody ever again.
Oh, there we go.
Like, that's perfect.
See you later. Perfect. By the way, you should just frame that, Rick. That's the reason people stay married. So say that again. Say it again so we can.
Low self-esteem is the key to staying married.
And you never want to date again.
Hold on a second. Along those same lines, the one guy that got kicked off was definitely had a little bit of a roly-poly stomach, and he was not full of high self-esteem and everything. That was one of the things that was going on, and everything. There was also a woman with like
that's the reason he got kicked off.
Were the hotties that you expect? There were some people that were definitely in that hottie category, but there were some other ones that were not necessarily in that category because they definitely tried to, I think, mix the crowd of folks and try to have some quote unquote regular people in the mix.
Diversity in Hollywood? I don't think so.
Yeah. The most appalling dating show was a couple of years ago where they brought in a bunch of women called cougars, which are, older women who are looking for sexual partners. And then the surprise reveal was they brought in all their sons. So the cougars are shopping for sexual partners among the kids of the other cougars. That was a very disturbing show.
That's pretty exciting. Now, Sasha did marry the 8-time women's chess champion of Canada, the whole country. Now, whatever possessed him to do that, I will tell you this, that's got to be a humbling chess experience. That's for sure.
Well, first of all, when we got married, she was definitely not 8 times Canadian chess champion, not even once. We were married in Ukraine, in Odessa, and left 2 years later and moved to Canada. And only then, the first time she became Canadian chess champion was in 1978 in Victoria, British Columbia. That was a place where she played. Although, as an exception, she was allowed to participate for Canadian ladies team in 1976 Chess Olympiad in Israel, and by far it was the best chess Olympiad ever. Very well organized, no Soviet Union and other Warsaw Bloc countries. It was just fantastic Olympiad.
USA had a chance for gold.
US gold, yeah, that was very memorable Olympiad.
But chess marriages, how many divorces are there in that? And I don't know. Do they stay together a long time, Sasha?
Most of them, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Except John Donaldson, I would agree.
Oh, Sasha, the couple that appeared on the chess show, how long have they been together? Because aren't they fairly newlyweds? And there's
not together for a long time. I think maybe 5-6 years. Right. Jim, what do you think?
I didn't hear the name.
Marian, Grandmaster Marian.
Oh, yeah. Well, they seem like they're very much in love. So.
Yeah, but they're married not for too long.
Yeah, but the reason you're married is what Rick pointed out: low self-esteem and other intangibles that don't seem to work.
Being able to be analytic, realizing that if you bust up your marriage, you'll eventually end up with somebody who's just as annoying, but in different ways, and you will have given up half your net worth.
Yeah. Hey, Sasha and Jim, I got a question for you. Does it help that particular couple? And I know that they've been on there. She is an amazing artist that is featured on your chess show, Sasha. But as I recall, they are definitely a May-December relationship. I want to say there's at least a 10 to 15 year gap, if not longer. So does that help in the relationship? Because it does seem like they have that age range difference and all in that space. I'm about to hit 61, so maybe I need to go find me a 40-year-old or something along those lines. But what is the thoughts about this age range difference? Is that helping them?
I think much more important is the mutual admiration that they both have for each other. I think that's far more important than the age difference, or if they're actually from different countries. Now they're in the process of moving to Spain, which will be a neutral territory. So, so they will enjoy their stay in Spain. That's for sure. It's a fantastic, beautiful country. Actually, speaking about Europe, very few people realize how much Europe is ahead of United States in every which way. It's a level of life. It's a quality of life. It's just anything at all. You can't touch even one subject where US is more preferable for life than Europe. I'm talking about Western Europe, of course.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So all people who travel to Europe must understand what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah. Well, why do you think I keep going over there every year?
I
Spending a month there.
read a
Because-
recent article about the happiest cities to live in, and Toronto was tied for first.
No, Toronto definitely seems like.
Toronto is a beautiful city, yeah, and very good for life.
Hey,
But
speaking
to
of
me,
places
it's sort
that
of,
are,
I think, because of the climate primarily. But anyway,
but speaking of places that are really rich in history and people apparently are moving there on a regular basis. I know we talked about it on the news recently that a lot of people are moving to Dubai and Singapore. But one thing that I found interesting that I did not know until this past weekend is that there is a global shortage, and apparently the media is reporting on this, that there is a global shortage of sand. So apparently over there in Dubai, they don't have enough sand, so they are importing it from Australia. And I wish Shaquille was here so I could find out what kind of sand they are getting from Australia. But apparently
that's got to be fake news.
shortage in the world, and
It's
apparently this is a problem. The UN has even said this. So what is our thoughts about
That's gotta
the
be fake
shortage
news.
of sand? Because every time I think about
probably-
that, I see plenty of sand. So what's
There's
up
not
with
Probably
this?
partially due
Not
to
enough
climate
water
change
in
with
Lake
erosion of beaches. There's a HBO show called Barry, which is about a psychotic hitman, and the gangsters on that show got out of the drug business and went into the sand smuggling business. So
It's a
I guess
thing,
it's a
I guess.
I don't think there's much money into that stuff. Sand smuggling. I don't
Well,
see it.
apparently there's a lot of money that is going into sand from Australia to Dubai. So apparently the folks in Dubai, all those royal folks over there, are spending a whole lot of money buying sand from Australia. So there might be some money there in sand. Maybe we've got to sell some of the red clay that exists here.
You know, on the Pod TV network, we have a bridge sale going on right now. The Golden Gate is for sale, and it's only for $15 million, which is a discount.
I thought it was the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, we're selling that one too. Come on, Jim. We're selling that one too. We're selling all our bridges in the United States to China, or frankly, anyone else will buy them. You can buy them through the Pod TV network. Now, with that, we were supposed to discuss Juneteenth, and there was a great person on your show the other day who was the producer of Buffalo Soldiers, which is now airing on PBS.
Yes.
So I'm going to do a plug for him because I did see it. It's a great show. So if you haven't seen Buffalo Soldiers yet, you want to tune into PBS. You got to find Buffalo Soldiers, and you can watch it. It's about the black soldiers that were basically ignored through history. You know, in other words,
part of
the
Civil War.
Civil War, past the Civil War, World War I, World War II, any wars, they're kind of like pushed aside in history altogether. But he did a fantastic job. I remember when he was on the show, your show, Mark, that World Edition actually, that he was talking about, well, I put cartoons for the kids. But actually the cartoons were really great fillers, to the point where I was trying to figure out, well, where did he find the person to do all these cartoons? In other words, they put inside the show. So he basically had you can see he's kind of a Ken Burns protege with an additional flair to it. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. So that's my plug for the.
Well, since we're giving plugs, I was going to give a plug, and actually it might be ironic because it is also a Western, and I stumbled across it last night. So if you have not had the chance yet to watch a film that features several great actors, including, I think, Tom Hanks and a number of others, but I actually watched Yellowstone, which talks about that whole Western nature and what was going on the Oregon Trail and all in that space. So I watched episode 1 yesterday, and matter of fact, one of the like the pirates came by and raided the village and definitely assaulted and killed some folks. So the sheriff that is featured on there actually came into the saloon and basically said that he was the only one that was allowed to shoot and kill people in that particular town. And definitely it is going on and dealing with everything from the mass amount of immigrants, because there were immigrants from all over the world. There was an African-American soldier that is featured in there as well. And there's even a woman that sacrificed her own life after all of her kids had been killed and all in that space. So there are a number of the storylines that are very poignant, and that is airing actually I think on Paramount. So if you get a chance, that is one that I watched, and I would definitely recommend others check it out as well, because it looks like they were trying to be very historically accurate in what was taking place, and that is something that doesn't always happen with our historical narratives and everything, but they were definitely reflecting on what was going on in those kind of
sounds like
frontier towns.
original 007 with the License to Kill.
Right.
Well, those are good plugs, but who could tell me besides Mark, what is June 19th? What's the origin of
June 19th? Juneteenth is the celebration of the emancipation.
Not Mark. I said not Mark.
I went on Wikipedia to make sure that I was somewhat informed, and
that's what I did too. So
But think Galveston, Texas. That's all I can say.
And on June 19th is where it was announced in Galveston, which is an island, I guess, off the coast. A Union general came in and said the 1865, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, came in and said, the slaves are free. Texas had kept fighting for 2 months after Appomattox, after the surrender. Texas just kept going. And that June 19th, 1865 is when that state got the news, or at least the former slaves in that state got the news they were free.
Yeah, but also the South did continue fighting much after that, and it was actually in Bennett's place here in Durham where the final surrender of a Confederate army took place. Then what happened in Galveston, even though the final surrender took place, they just didn't tell the slaves. They're going, well, we just won't tell them we lost the war. And so they continued the slavery thing in Galveston.
Well, they
until
didn't
the
have
Union
TV
soldiers
back then.
came down.
There was a lag
What?
time for word
There's
to
a
get
lag
around.
time, yeah.
But
In other words, the news didn't make
but they had to have a soldier
Galveston.
go down there and enforce it. Basically,
You have to go to Galveston and go visit the Moody family. They own all the banks and hotels, and they were basically a big Confederate operation. They own American National Life, which we do a lot of business with. They own the banks there. Of course, this is many generations down, but it didn't surprise me that would happen in Galveston, Texas. So anyway, that's
surprisingly there. You mentioned Durham, and Durham has some interesting history.
Has Bennett's place.
I was
in Durham.
talking about when I did the Juneteenth lectures, because I was actually on a city bus doing some of those this past week on Saturday and all along those lines. And there was even some conversations among the liberal communities that existed and everything, because that is part of the narrative of Durham, was that there were people that were wanting things to be good in certain neighborhoods because they didn't want it necessarily to spill over into their neighborhoods, so they would help fund it. So definitely Mr. Duke is a picture that exists on the building of that I work at, the Hayti Heritage Center. And all that. He said part of it is he gave money, as did Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr was actually who Carborough is named after, but it is also a self-avowed, and he definitely, you can go read it on his documents, was a self-avowed racist who believed in the power and the wonderment of the Klan and all in that space, but he still gave some money to a stained glass dedication and all in that space, because versus having people spill into his community, he was going to help build up the community that was part of the Black Wall Street and all of that. So there was definitely some separate but equal, and some folks in that space, including some of the founders of different countries, different areas that played into that conversation. So they definitely gave money in order to help develop these communities in order to keep them away from their community.
Hey, Mark, there's another question I had for you. You mentioned Black Wall Street. And
yes.
Wasn't that Tulsa? Wasn't there a show about Tulsa?
There were several Black Wall Street. There was more than one. Tulsa was one, and there was a show around Tulsa. Durham is seen as one of the leading ones that existed, and there were a number of businesses, over 150, that existed here in Durham. There were some that were in Charleston. This was all part of a Reconstruction era, and
Right.
all of that. Unfortunately, gentrification got in the way, and highways and other things kind of destroyed those areas. There was even one in New York in the Seneca area and all Seneca Falls, and I think that's part of Central Park from my understanding, and all along those lines. So they existed throughout the country and the world, even one down in Florida, Roswell, which
The
is
show
also
that I'm talking about, though, that was in the 20th century. So when we
Mhm.
talk about June 19th and 1865, that was still going on, liberation and suppression and all of that kind of stuff. I think when we look at the history, this is a date that we celebrate because it reminds us not of how far we've come, but how far we have to go.
Well, also realize that like Joe Biden, his birth date is closer to the Civil War than it is to today. So
That's interesting.
it's kind of interesting when somebody brought that fact out to show you that the War of Northern Aggression, as you call it down south,
Yes.
is actually not that far away. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because I used to live in the Pacific Northwest, and they kind of like ignore all this stuff. Well, the minute I moved to North Carolina, it's a big deal. So it really depends on where you live, because
I mean, yeah, a lot of the
Pacific
resentments
Northwest,
are
they
still
really
in place.
weren't affected by this.
Yeah, let's not forget the gentleman
There
you
were
were
the
talking about.
Oregon
It was
Territory.
let's not forget the gentleman you were talking about is actually from the Pacific Northwest as well, because the
Yeah, he's from Portland.
filmmaker was actually from Portland, Oregon, and
Yeah,
was
the
actually
filmmaker was from
at a Juneteenth celebration, but he was also learning about the Buffalo Soldiers and other historical
Yeah.
figures. As
Well,
well.
I'll tell you this also, the Buffalo Soldiers and Juneteenth and all this other stuff. When I grew up and I was Phi Alpha Theta in history, you know how much they taught about that in the southern schools like University of South Florida, HB Plant. You got this 0. So until somebody like him brings this history to the
absolutely,
forefront,
Nick, you're right.
you don't learn anything about it. In other words, we said Buffalo Soldiers. What are you talking about? Okay.
So now you know that the
Juneteenth, what the heck is that?
Hold on a second.
well, you know, Nick, Nick, the crazy part about it,
It's
One at a
unique
time, guys.
day, Juneteenth. Of course, nothing of that is in Canada at all. And actually, I found about it today in the morning when I wanted to sell some puts, and I realized the stock market in US is closed. The market is open, but I
A
could
disaster.
Monday Millionaires.
I've lost a day of my
On
profit.
Juneteenth Day.
Unfortunately, I have to work.
Well, see, that's the other thing is also if you're from Russia, you don't hear about all this South North garbage because you got Russians in your backyard.
Nick, but this
If
is
you're from Ukraine, you got Russians in your backyard.
you know what? I can't figure out something that the black problem is not unique in the United States because there are many countries in the world when there are black people. It's anywhere from South America, Brazil,
like most of Africa.
not so much in Argentina, and none of it is in Uruguay. There are no black people in Uruguay, period. But in Europe, there are a lot of black people, of course, in England, in France, and many other countries. And somehow that effect of Juneteenth, liberation ideas, and all this stuff, or even in Canada, there are quite a lot of black people. But I must admit, there is a huge difference. The black people in Canada are from West Indies, Caribbean, not from United States.
Right.
They're completely different people, different structure. So,
Hold on a second, because 2 years ago in 2021, this country that you're talking about, Canada, actually did have its own celebration, and it is actually celebrated, I think, closer to August and everything, because they actually did do their first nationwide Emancipation Day, which is basically what Juneteenth is. So we can't say that there is not a Juneteenth variation. It may not be celebrated on the same day, but there is a holiday that is in that same space.
the stock market was still open on that day.
Get ready for
See,
this.
Sasha measures everything by if your stock market
Absolutely.
is open.
If stock market is
that's
closed,
meaningful.
then it's a big deal. If it's open,
Stock market open, big deal.
So
Stock market
I
open,
looked
big
up
deal.
the racial breakdown of the U.S. for this show, and currently the U.S. is 59% white, 19% Latino, 13% black, 6% Asian, And somewhere between 2041 and 2046, the U.S. will become a majority minority country. That is, that white people will become less than 50% of the country.
Yeah, that's definitely happening.
Probably a good thing. And, you know, but except that it leads to white people now like freaking out about their lost privilege.
That was the whole campaign, was make America white again. You know, so we've had a lot of problems around that. And Sasha's pointing out that we had a civil war. And one of the reasons we had a civil war was because there was a culture in the South where it was an economic necessity to have people that you didn't pay to do the labor. And you needed blacks to do the labor because they came from an environment where they could take the southern heat and still do work. Whereas a person like I was from Ireland would drop dead halfway through the first day. And so, you know, they exploited these people. They brought them over in chains. And then the North decided that they should not be enslaved.
Jim, one correction.
Just a moment, Sasha, I'm not done. And so when they had this war over this, then there were hard feelings. To this day, you see people flying Confederate flags and feeling like the War of Northern Aggression is still going on. So this is not the state in other countries in Europe, but although there was a lot of slavery that was imported into South America, they never had the Civil War, this fight. That's still
Jim, quick question, because you said of your Irish descent, and there were definitely some Irish immigrants that were doing a lot of hard labor, particularly there in the West Coast and all along those lines. They were part of the train development and all in that space. So I don't know that maybe you personally, but some of your stock and some of your ancestors were definitely doing some very physical labor, because the Irish were also exploited as well.
We were indentured servants.
Indentured servants.
We were not in chains, except paper chains. We are under contract. And so we sold in order to get here, because we were starving. What we did was sign away our lives for 10, 15 years. And
I thought it was a 7
they owned us.
Wasn't it a 7-year deal for your passage? For your trip over, you had to basically sign away yourself for 7 years.
In indentured servitude, and you can look that up. It's a historical fact, but it's not taught in schools.
No, actually it is taught in schools. So I'm going to correct you. All the people graduating from school with student debt today are indentured servants. Please, Jim, it exists today.
They don't call them that, Nick. So you're
they don't call themselves that.
And I understand you're making it.
History.
No, you're wrong.
No.
Indentured servitude of the Irish was not taught. And the English did it to the Irish. The Irish were the blacks of Europe at that point.
Yeah, but we have indentured servants today.
This idea about indentured servitude is a parallel to what they're going through.
It's happening. It's happening right before your nose. Wake up!
It's not the same, Nick. You're making. You're making a
why it isn't the same.
No,
tell me why it isn't the same. They can't discharge their debts through bankruptcy.
They can't take your wife and do whatever they want to her today because of student debt. They could in 1850.
And that's part of what Yellowstone deals with. Part of Yellowstone even deals with some of the indentured servants.
No, they have indentured servants.
That was part of the narrative that was explored in that particular story that was about the Oregon Trail and other things that were going on in that space. So they definitely did talk about some of the indentured servants and some of the other injustices of different cultures that were going on, because it was part of their narrative that was going on. And I'm trying to think of the actor that was part of that movie. It's very well known actor. And
I gotta go.
That gives me an idea. They should redo Indecent Proposal, but with student debt, where Robert Redford or somebody is a millionaire offers to discharge a couple's student debt if he can sleep with the wife.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this would be the new version of Indecent Exposure.
The new version of
Indecent Proposal. Yeah,
Indecent Proposal.
Speaking of indecent proposals and all in that line,
wonderful.
Then we have to tell Jim, and I know he's left the room, that he's wrong. It does exist today.
So my question for you guys, like when you look at Germany and Japan after World War II, where we got in there, we threw money at them and we rehabbed them, we occupied them. If Lincoln hadn't been assassinated, and if we'd gone into the South and thrown money at them, reconstructed them, occupied them more thoroughly, would we still be having this kind of ongoing, resentment, or would the South have gotten its act together?
Yes, you would. I mean, see, you have to look at it from like the wealthiest people in the world back prior to the war between Northern aggression was actually lived in Mississippi on the Natchez Trail. Okay, so you have to imagine the center of wealth was moving to northern Mississippi, and they were basically plantation owners. So what happened, you destroyed their entire way of life, their entire economic system by the War of Northern Aggression. And frankly, they lost huge fortunes that they even resent today. I mean, so you have in the South, you have all these, displaced cotton farmers or whatever the heck they are. So a lot of them are still fighting the Civil War. Now,
I can't gotten in there and like made them whole, not the rich people, not, but like the populate, like, help them construct economies that didn't, rest on slave labor. And
right. Well, here's the argument that may take place in the next century. Okay, so we don't have slave labor today, but with student loans and student debts and basically non-dischargeable and bankruptcy, you have basically a class of indentured servitudes that are going out right now. And those are people that graduate from some of these schools that take unbelievable amounts of money from them, stick them with a bunch of student debt and a low-paying job. And so the thing is, just think about it, maybe it'll be sooner than next century, but the next 50 years, they're going to say, can you believe we had indentured servants in the United States because student loans? Come on.
Nick, and remember, it's not easy life for slave owners as well, because I had one slave on my own several years ago, and I had a problem to be inventive enough to find out what I want him to do. So it's almost required a lot of work on my own to come up with any tasks, some ideas, some jobs that I want him to do. And he was willing, and he was doing anything, whatever I told him to do. And eventually I ran out of ideas. Sometimes I would say at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I would let him go simply because I didn't have any jobs for him at that time.
Yeah.
So you brought this up a couple of times and everything. How much did he? How much freedom did he have to come and go and all in that space? Because the way you've described it, it sounds more like an indentured servant than an actual slave. Because to me, a slave is somebody that does not have a lot of control, does not have a lot of ability to go as they please, because that is not necessarily a slave in the traditional sense of the word. And you just said that you let him go at 3 o'clock. So that is, to me, not necessarily a slave and all in that space. So when you say that you had a slave, define to me what your definition of a slave is and what you were doing in that space, because I don't necessarily agree with your definition, but I want to hear what you mean by a slave, because you just said that you were going to let him go at 3 o'clock because you didn't have enough work. That's not slavery.
Situation was very simple. He owed me a couple of $1,000s. And admittedly, he said that there's no way that he can repay me. He has no jobs, he has no prospects, and he's not sure even what he's going to do. Although he was a very young guy, but he said that he has no idea what he's going to do for the rest of his life. So what he offered is that he will provide for 1 month slaves-like labor, and will do anything, whatever I want him to do during the day. And it would be like from 8 in the morning until 10 in the evening. So any hours, any time, anything I want him to do, he would provide. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. He was cleaning the house, and he was doing all chores and some shopping, and he was not very good cook. unfortunately. But he could
Skill
go.
sets were limited.
By that nature, a maid and a butler could be considered a slave, and I would not necessarily put them in the same category and everything. Because if you look at the definition of slavery in the historical standpoint, what you had was not necessarily a slave. He might have been doing some work in that, and it might have been paying off a debt and all in that space. But that is not the same as slavery in the traditional sense of the word. And some people that went through slavery would find that a outright insult that you would make that comparison and all in that space. So I'm just going
it was slavery for just 1 month. It has a timetable, 1 month. I couldn't keep him for second month, or I could let him go earlier than a month. That's also true. But that was arrangement. And also, listen, I'm not very good slave owner. Of course, I could have done much better with him, but I did the best I could.
Over the next 50 years, we're likely to be building a whole new class of servants. And you could call them slaves, depending on what they'll. But we're gonna, the robots are coming, and the robot girlfriends.
Well, if you remember, by the way, in slavery in Russia was abolished only in 1861, not too long ago, and about the same time in the United States. But again, they didn't call them slaves; they called them serfs.
Serfs. It's a different term.
Although there is not much difference really, because they couldn't run away from places where they were assigned. They had to stay there, and they couldn't earn their way to freedom. What I wanted to correct Jim, but he's gone now. I wanted to correct when he mentioned that the slaves were enchained upon arrival to America, and what I wanted to correct him, that they were enslaved in Africa, not in America. They were enslaved in Africa, sold to Portuguese traders, and Portuguese traders brought them to North America and sold them whoever was willing to buy them. And at first, admittedly, no one wanted even to buy them because they didn't know what it is, what's the concept, what's good in it. And they were taking them simply as members of their families, and they were living and working together with owners of the
well, to come to the point that Nick was talking about, the guest that was on and everything, part of what that institution that you're talking about, that is why you're upset that they're not open today, is they were actually part of the slave trade. So actually Wall Street was built as part of that nature. So a number of the folks that were in slavery were actually sold at that particular venue and everything. And that is one of the things that historian brought up, was the fact that Wall Street, and it definitely was part of the slave trade, because part of what they were doing was selling the human stock as part of what was going on, because it was human stock that they were selling as part of the slave trade. So the North has a role in the slave trade as well, and Wall Street is part of that legacy, and that's part of what the historian was bringing up on Coco's show.
Yeah, he actually, the one on Coco's show, wrote a lot of looks to be some very good books, Mark. That would be very interesting reading. We should bring him on World Edition if you can go find these people, because they're.
No, he's easy. He's been on Maxine's show too, so he's actually fairly easy to find. He's been on Maxine's show twice, and now Coco's one, so he's been on our shows at least 3 times and all in that. I was going to divert just quickly to another topic and everything, because apparently some of the scientists are upset about social media, because apparently physicians and scientists are experiencing amazing levels of harassment on social media, according to a new survey. So about 2/3 of respondents said they had been harassed on social media since the COVID-19 pandemic began, up from 23.3% of physicians surveyed in 2020. And about 64% said that the harassment related to comments made about the pandemic, while 64% of those harassed said the pandemic had affected their own use of social media. So we talk about the hero nature of doctors and everything, but apparently they are also facing some backlash and all in that space. So definitely I was wondering if folks had thoughts about that, because that was one of the other arguments I was going to bring up, because apparently a lot of folks are upset at the scientists and don't always agree with the attitudes that the scientists are giving them.
In terms of raw human numbers, COVID has been America's greatest tragedy. Nearly 1.5 million Americans dead from COVID, 2.5% of all seniors dead from COVID, tens of millions of people lastingly injured from COVID, more U.S. dead from COVID than U.S. dead in all of our wars combined. And one reaction to all of this tragedy is deep denial, including attacks on scientists.
Yeah.
Yep, and apparently there's even some racial aspect of it as well, because one of this says that women were more likely than men to undergo this harassment than men, and about 82% of the Black respondents reported harassment based on race or ethnicity. That compared to 69% of the Hispanic respondents, and 52% of Asians, and 15% of the white respondents. So it definitely does seem like some people have some narrow attitudes about some of the people based on their racial ethnicity as well.
Yeah, plus racial minorities had higher illness and death rates under COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
we have a vaccine denier who's a semi-major presidential candidate. RFK Jr. is like a vaccine anti-vax lunatic, and he's riding the Kennedy name into the presidential election, and could really mess it up for the Democrats by taking Democrat votes away from whoever the nominee is going to be, likely Biden.
Yeah,
the election's going to be tough. I'll tell you something about the social media harassment, Mark. I'm not being harassed on social media since Mark Zuckerberg wiped out my Facebook account because of all the stuff we're doing on Pod TV. So I got wiped out completely. 4,000 followers gone overnight, thanks to Facebook just wiping they literally took down my entire site. Speaking of which, it was interesting. We have a poll going on, news that you can trust, and the number one news source you can trust according to LinkedIn, Fox. Number 2 is CBS. Number 3 was CNN. And number 4 was Pod TV. We didn't even beat CNN, which is horrible, I think.
Horrible.
Well, also remember that a lot of the people on LinkedIn haven't seen Pod TV yet. So I was just throwing us in there to see how we would compete with the majors. And also I was kind of shocked that Fox, wins, because the thing is they're horrible when it comes to the truth. Another very interesting thing.
But they have the most aggressive poll responders.
Oh, really? Okay. Another thing that you pointed out, which I thought was fascinating, you pointed on the news and we never discussed it. Okay, remember this guy, Donald Trump, okay, in case you forgot, he used to be president of the United States. So right after he went to court and got arraigned, he went to his favorite restaurant in Miami, the Versailles or whatever, a Cuban restaurant, and said, food for everybody.
And walked out on the bill.
And then everybody went, ate food, and then he walked out. And he didn't pay the bill. And it's almost like everybody's shrugging their shoulders. And I thought, as a matter of fact, when he did that, because I'm not saying I used to work with people like Trump, but I did work in New York for 5 years and work with people a lot like Trump. I said, this is a typical thing that he would do. I told my wife, he's going to go in there, food for all, and then he's going to walk out without paying the bill. And guess what? He walked out without paying the bill. So what are the panelists' thoughts?
I got a question for Sasha. Is it maybe that he didn't have the money to pay the bill? Because I know that Sasha had brought up on a couple of shows a couple of times that maybe Mr. Trump is not as well off as some of his allies and supporters would portray him to be. So did he walk out of the bill because he couldn't pay the bill, or did he walk out on the bill because he chose to, and it was a choice where he had the resources? And I know that even Sasha has said that he is basically a walk-in bankruptcy and all in that space. So maybe he didn't have the money. What is your thought, Sasha? Did he have the money to pay the bill?
I'm not following his well worth every day, but I know that many very authoritative people commented on Trump that by the time that all his legal problems will be solved, doesn't matter, he'll go to jail or he'll not go to jail, he will be a penniless, sick man and will die thereafter pretty soon. That's all that's going to happen.
Trump and his family over the past 50 years have skipped out on approximately $1.5 billion worth of debt from lenders, what they owe the IRS, what they owe contractors, workers. It's just what Trump and family do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. In other words, when he walked out without paying the bill, when he made that announcement, I was going, sounds to me this guy's going to walk out without paying the bill. Then he did. He walked out without paying the bill, which in my opinion, it didn't shock me because the other thing they were saying, well, he's having a hard time, finding lawyers to represent him.
Yeah.
Look, all the lawyers know that he won't pay you. So
they're asking for huge retainer fees, like $3-5 million.
Yeah, but they also want it up front because they also know if they don't get it up front, Sasha, they're not going to see it. He stiffed Rudy Giuliani, one of his favorite attorneys. The last couple of months when he decides to fire you, he stiffs you on the way out the door. So, but what really got me, I stayed in the back when you had your pastor there on the show this morning, Mark, my question is, why do evangelical Christians support a guy who's basically a crook? I was going to ask him that
we
question.
asked that question, and he kind of alluded the question because that was the whole question around the evangelicals, and he did say that the moral majority was a mistake that they made under the Reagan administration, tying themselves to the Republican Party, and he gave the notion that he was more of a independent. So he did kind of say that could have been a mistake on their part. Like I said, I'm not going to speak for the man because he can speak for himself.
Yeah.
The Bible has plenty of flawed heroes. King David did a lot of terrible things. And as long as you're fighting for the causes supported by evangelicals, they will tolerate misbehavior because we're all flawed under God. And that's why we have to ask Jesus for forgiveness. Plus, like evangelicals may or may not hear about, or if they do hear about, believe some of the things they hear.
That's definitely the case, and that's one of the things that he was bringing up and all in that kind of space. Hey, Rick, a quick question for you, because I did see that social media was in the news for people that are on the opposite side of you, because you are definitely an intellectual elite and all of that. But I did see that a team at the TUM think tank, and I think that might be TUM's the aspirin, I'm not sure, is investigating how social media can better be used by people with intellectual disabilities, together with athletes from the Special Olympic World Games, which would be taking place in June, starting on started on the 17th and it'll run till the 25th. But definitely they are finding ways that social media can be used in that space because it can help people make their professional life easier, and access is a conversation among that community, and some apps are not necessarily geared toward that community as well. So I'm just wondering.
I follow one Special Olympics guy and on Twitter, and people are kinder to him knowing his situation than they are to anybody else. I mean, so yeah, I believe that social media could be good, as long as people don't troll, Special Olympics people.
Troll them and abuse them and all in that kind of spaces, because we do know that.
Well, I call 24 people a day on Twitter frickin' idiots who are just regular people saying stupid stuff, and people call me an idiot. But if somebody does have some actual disabilities, people will back off.
Yeah, that makes sense. And definitely that is showing that respect level and all in that kind of space. And we don't always get that respect. That's part of what the conversation has been with a couple of our guests, is making sure that we are exercising that respect element while also admitting that we can have different opinions and all in that space. But sometimes that respect element is not as accepted as it should be, and all in that kind of way. But we definitely have to work on that and try to be respectful in the way that we handle those differences.
But I think disrespect is important too. I think it's important, like in the olden days, before the Republicans weaponized and mobilized idiots were kept in check by their neighbors and communities. some idiot in a town of 10,000 people is going around spouting nonsense, and everybody in the town is like, shut up. But social media let idiots get together and give them more just power to spread their beliefs. And it's important to call out not people with actual mental disabilities, but people who are acting stupid, saying stupid things, and promoting stupid beliefs.
Speaking of stupid beliefs and all along those lines, I've got an idea for something that we can do here, and we got Toby coming back as well for the network and all in that space. But I saw that a new record has been set. Students apparently over there in Connecticut, a group of high schoolers decided to dance nearly 16 miles in a conga line to break the world record. I'm thinking that we could get enough of the Pod TV host and everybody else that we can break 16 miles. That doesn't seem like that's all that great of a distance and everything. So, Nick, what are your thoughts? Are we going to get together with all of the folks, everybody from Shaquille to Sasha to myself and a number of others, and try to take this record down? Because apparently this record was just set about an hour ago and all in that space. So they danced nearly 16 miles in a conga line to break the world record. I think we could get 16.1, but I don't know whether y'all agree with me or not. So do we want to take on these high school kids and take this record down?
No, let the high school kids win.
I have varicose veins and hemorrhoids, and I don't think I could conga for 16 miles.
Yeah, I think they're better off for that.
Mark, is there any money in it?
There we go. There's Sasha.
I'm sure that there might be some money. I think some of these record holders do get some appearance fees and other things when they appear on these various shows. So there might be some limited money, but I just hope he might have a better idea than I would know, since he does things in the all ball space, and who knows, maybe they've done the conga lines over there at the Durham Bulls. So is there any money in these conga lines? He's shaking his head. Yeah, but there's no money in them.
That's an affirmative.
I should have started with more fundamental questions. Are there any money for organizations and its leaders like Oath Keepers or Proud Boys, for example? I've read a big material about Oath Keepers in, I think it was Foreign Affairs magazine, and they were describing how they function and what's going on and so on. And in fact, there is one person, the leader of the group, he is getting paid, none except him. And the pay is $400 a week. So there is a huge fight to elect next leader, because that leader is taking $400 a week. So what a miserable organization is it that pays only one person, its leader, and it's $400 a week. So how do they exist? What makes them drive so hard to support one idiot? What's the purpose of this? And he's relying on this organization, Proud Boys, and there are a lot of people who think that they're intellectuals and they know better, so they support the same garbage. So this is what makes me extremely upset about this Republican Party of US. It has no purpose to exist at all. It's supported by the most militant group. Its leader, it's twice impeached, several charges, including criminals, already filed, and are being filed in the next few weeks. So what kind of party is this? It's a garbage. It's not a party. It's a real garbage.
Well, there is big money if you're a Republican pundit. Alex Jones accumulated roughly $1 billion. Hannity and Tucker Carlson, before he was fired, were each making about $35 million a year. It's so
there's money in conservative talk radio. So Sasha, what you have to do is just change your tune and say Trump is wonderful. Liberals are bad, conservatives are good. Donate here to the Sasha Star Conservative Fund, and they'll donate because.
Hey, Nick, we have an entrance point for that now, because as you just noticed, Jeff Kinley has been on Glenn Beck. He's been on Fox and Friends. He's been on a number of other shows. So that evangelistic person that we were talking about is the evangelistic author. We now have an in with him because he's been on the show. He loved our show and loved the questions that we're asking, even though there were some that were more pointed than he might have expected and everything. But he did seem open to those conversations. So maybe we need to put Jeff in touch with Sasha, and Sasha can then appear on the Fox shows and all in it.
We just need to change our tune, buddy, for the money. What you do is, Sasha, you just go, Sasha, let me explain. I'm going to recoach you. Here's what you say. Trump is wonderful. Liberals are bad. Conservatives are great. Donate here. Okay?
Well, they've done studies.
And they go, oh, he's telling me what I want to know. They'll send you money, Sasha. So
they've done analysis on when billionaires donate money to political causes, they get what they donated back fivefold in tax breaks.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so but the thing is, we need a new script writer, Rick, and here's going to be the script. You got to give it to Sasha. Liberals are bad. Conservatives are good. Trump is wonderful. Donate here. That's all you have to say. You don't have to go over any issues. You don't have to look at anything objectively. Just liberals are bad. Conservatives are good. Trump is wonderful. Donate here. And open up your little PayPal thing and start making money. Okay?
Yeah, I think you have.
It's a good idea.
This could be a great plan. So this could be something that we have in that regard. By the way, I did find finally, it took me a while, the name of the actor that I was trying to remember from Yellowstone, and he is actually a very powerful actor. That is actually Sam Elliott. So Sam Elliott was the struggle actor that I was trying to remember that is part of that story, and has been definitely somebody that has been involved in a number of series, but he's very much involved in that Yellowstone movie series and all along those lines. So definitely.
Yeah, he seems like a normal person. See, whenever I see people from California, especially if they get involved in the media, they're abnormal. In other words, they're strange, they're deviants. Okay.
We were talking at the top of the show about people staying married. And if you want to know if somebody in Hollywood is normal, look at their spouse. Sam Elliott I think he's probably been married for 35 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
He's got a very like normal spouse.
Right. And he seems to be a normal person, but he happened to do well in Hollywood. He made some decent money. But that's not the norm. The norm is, I think they actually suffer from, a personality disorder when you're narcissistic. And I think that studies have been done, maybe Rick, you know more about than I do, that the people in Hollywood suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, and they move toward that spectrum. And those are the people that are generally more successful. And
I would argue that for long-term success, it helps if you're smart. Like at the beginning of an actress's career, it helps if you're pretty, but for longevity, it really helps, as in any career, to be smart. You look at Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep's not stupid.
There's Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, and I think they were involved in that same Yellowstone series. But Rick, and I know we're winding down. How important is it to win these awards and everything? Because apparently, I know the writers are on strike, and definitely the actors are involved as well. But apparently, yesterday, Sam Elliott, the one I was referring to, won a SEG SAG Actors Guild Award for his outstanding performance by a male actor in the television movie or limited series 1883.
The strike has been messing up award season because what happens, there are 600 shows competing for awards, and the shows butter voters like me up by saying, come see a talk with the stars of the show. And and they feed you, and you watch, and you feel all special. And the strike has shut all that down because everybody has kind of agreed. All the stars have agreed not to show up for the butter up the voter events.
Wow.
Yep, no doubt about that. And by the way, that series that I referred to is the one that he won the award for. So 1883 is the actual title of the series, because that was the year of the Yellowstone activities and everything. So if you want to go and look for the title, you can look under that name, which is 1883.
Voting is weird now. My wife and I voted for the Emmys yesterday. You do it online, and with 600 shows to choose from, you know, are you really making an informed decision? Because my wife and I have only seen about 50 of the 600 shows. You know, so we're like, okay, like, you know, that show was I never saw it, but I like that actor who stars in it. That was probably good. I'll give it. It's a mess, but so is you know, political voting and polling right now.
Right. That's true. It's name recognition. There's a formula for winning. It has nothing to do with competency.
The Republicans came up with this strategy where they run somebody with a name similar to the leading Democratic candidate and hope people get confused and vote for the wrong person. And that has worked a couple times in Florida.
Right. Yeah. You know, yeah, and because and that those types of strategies actually do work. So it's just really very unfortunate that you have that. But it's sad to see that Hollywood shut down. Sorry to see that and all this and to a certain extent, Rick, rightfully so, because the thing is the script writers make a difference whether or not the show's good or not. And they tend to poo-poo that, and they think the talent should be getting all the money, and then the CEO gets more than them, and the script writers, the people that do all the work, don't get paid.
But do you need a script writer? Do you need a script writer if you've got AI? And like I said before, there have been a number of folks are writing different things, be that operas, be that movies, be that novels, be that term papers, or a number of other things. And
it depends on whether the words matter. If it's a Liam Neeson movie where you want to see him beat up a bunch of people, the words don't matter so much.
Right, that's true. Right, depends if the words do matter. Well, we got to think about also, Mark. Ultimately, we're going to be replaced by Chat GDP, so you'll have talk shows, and the talk shows are all going to be robots talking to each other, and people are going to be listening to robots talk. Think about
the robots will be talking to each other, but along the same lines, I mean,
and they'll be watched by robots as well.
We'll have the Rick Rosner robot. It'll be
the Rick Rosner robot, but I just mentioned the TV series.
We'll have the Mark Lee robot. And then the thing is,
the Toby robot, a number of the other robots, the Maxine robot, the Sharon robot, a number of other robots. But the question is, some of these things, the robot can get historically accurate. I hear what you're saying, Rick, but let's take 1883 or let's take 1776. The robot can literally, or ChatGPT can literally look up the information about those historical periods and get that historical narrative that the actors can then play and everything. So do you really need a writer to get this information with a lot of people?
If you want to have a show that you can sit down and watch with your full attention and can teach you something, show you something that you haven't seen before, then you need human writers. If you're just watching, letting garbage play in the background, you know, while you're, I don't know, eating dinner or you know, playing words with friends, then the words don't matter.
It's only a matter of time that we're going to be all replaced with Chat GDP. And when you talk about Juneteenth, Alexa will give this whole diatribe on it, down to the XYZ and an avatar format, and we're all off the air. And that'll all happen probably in the next 10 years, Mark. So
that's going to ruin Ken Regan. That's going to ruin Ken Regan's whole notion, because Ken Regan gives this all this great narrative about the chess games and all in this space.
Ken will be replaced with Ken Regan GDP. So, you know, forget it. He'll have an AI GDP taking over Ken Regan's position. So, you know, it's just a matter of time. Watch. It'll probably happen the next 10 years. You know? Well,
eventually we'll all be chipped and we will get the information piped directly into our heads. And we may become, we'll become part of Chat GB.
Now, will we be chipped in our necks, or will we have it in our glasses? Because I've heard both theories. Some people are saying you will literally have
we'll have all that stuff. We'll have contact lenses that throw up information directly into your eyes.
You're talking about time when all human beings will become irrelevant, and why would artificial intelligence would spend even money or any efforts to pipe this information into your brains? Nobody would need your brains or my brains or anybody's brains. So,
but Sasha, there is a guest that we're going to have very shortly on. I'm hoping that, because he actually reached out to me and is actually a relative of mine, but and this may be some stock that you may be interested in, but I'll tell you what's going on and then you can tell me if something you're interested in. But I have a cousin that served several years in our U.S. military, and he's now part of a company that is literally developing warp technology. So him and his VP may be coming on to have a conversation. So we may be getting warp speed sooner versus later. So if we get warp technology, are you going to invest in that, Sasha? Because that is something that is more realistic than people are thinking about.
When you say warp technology, are you saying that faster than light travel?
Totally. Warp speed.
No, I'm not a believer in that.
Well, like I said, my cousin is part of a organization and a company that is working on that technology, and he and his president will be coming in talking about that. But yes, warp speed
could be a virtual travel, not a real travel, but virtual travel. So in virtual travel, I don't think you have any limitations of speed, whether it's the speed of light or just anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, we're going to speed on out of here because we're at the hour. So I want to thank our guests, and we will see you next week on the media show, although I will not be hosting. I'm going to be in Victoria, British Columbia.
I'm going to be hanging out with Sasha.
Have a good day. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.